So I'd like to start by thanking the grace of heaven, virtues of masters, grand predecessor, transmitters, and all of you for giving me this opportunity today. So just to review what precept means, it's the ethical rules or guidelines that develop the mind and our character to make progress on our path to enlightenment. Because in the world, there are so many people that are very lost and they're used to doing things that they should not be doing, right? So we need to have laws or precepts that help guide people's conduct and their behavior. Now, Holy Teacher said that precepts, they're fundamental. They transcend life and death. And without understanding precepts, we might unknowingly commit a lot of sins or faults. And it's like not having enough income to cover our expenses. So we might try to accumulate all these merits and put in all this effort, but if we understand the precepts, we might accidentally create many sins that reduce our merits. So these precepts serve as a way to help reduce our sins or our faults. And for every cultivator, precepts are an essential ladder to climbing the Bodhisattva path. And Holy Teacher said that regardless of our virtues and our merits, if the precepts are not clear, it's the same as wearing dirty clothes without washing them clean. If we don't clean them, then the stains stay, right? They remain. And when we wear them again, the stains will still be there. So these bad habits that we have, it's because over many lifetimes, we haven't been able to get rid of them yet. So they still exist within us. And once they sprout or come about, they thrive like weeds. So unless we completely remove them through keeping the precepts, those seeds will remain. And the precepts also help us to overcome the three poisons: greed, anger, and stubbornness. So Holy Teacher says that these precepts are actually meant to free us, not to bind us. But the stronger our aspiration, the more it's going to feel restricted in the beginning, right? It feels like we can't do this, we can't do that. Especially if we take the vegetarian vow, it feels like there's so many things we can't eat, especially in social gatherings or celebrations. It feels like it's very tricky, and sometimes it's a headache. And it feels very restricting, all these rules and regulations. But our precepts, they're like tracks of a train. Once we derail, we fall off the tracks. It's very dangerous, okay? So what we also have to keep in mind is that freedom also means not obstructing or taking away someone else's freedom. That keep us all in line so that there's not just chaos everywhere, right? About other precepts like the 15 temple precepts. So today we're going to focus on another grouping called the 5 precepts. So the 5 precepts include no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no alcohol or intoxicants. So aside from, the obvious external reasons why we want to keep to these 5 precepts, there's internal reasons too. By not killing, we can nurture our compassion and our mercy. By not stealing, we nurture our generosity. No sexual misconduct to nurture our faithfulness. No lying to nurture our honesty and our loyalty. And no alcohol or drugs to nurture our awareness, our responsibility. So the no killing precept, the first precept, as cultivators, we want to love and respect all life. And life refers to all sentient beings, anyone or anything that has a Buddha nature, a soul, right? All sentient beings, they cherish or value their own lives, regardless of their size, their status, their species. So a compassionate person does not kill. We want to be like the Buddhas, right? They're the most compassionate. They see all of us, all sentient beings, as their own children. So this first precept of not killing refers to not only refraining from taking life, but also not encouraging others to do so too, right? And also not working in jobs that directly or indirectly support killing. Instead, as cultivators, we want to actively protect and rescue life. We want to help all sentient beings to be free from fear and so that they can be happy and safe too. Now, another aspect to this first precept of no killing is the karma, or the cause and effect. So Holy Teacher said, while we want to survive ourselves, these small animals, these small creatures, they also want to survive. So if we kill them, later on, they're going to want revenge or payback too. In this present life, in the afterlife, and even in future lives after many generations. So he says, for example, when we plant vegetables, some grow and yield results very quickly, while others, like apples or lychees, they might take several years before producing any fruit. So it's the same thing, right? Some people wonder why they don't see consequences of their wrongdoings immediately. And it's because they still have a lot of merits that they've accumulated over many lifetimes in the past. So they're shielded from those immediate consequences. And then on the other hand, some people, they feel like they do so many good things, put in so much effort, yet they don't seem to have good fortune. And that's because they don't have enough merits to outweigh the actions of their past lives. Okay, so we have to know that it's not just taking one life that leads to consequences. And Holy Teacher tells us that everyone needs to understand that karma is absolutely fair. It's fairer than the law. And karma is something we cannot escape at. So we've talked also a lot about vegetarianism and how that's the foundation of cultivation. A point that Holy Teacher makes is specifically that we need to be careful with fish. If it's a female fish, they have a lot of eggs in their stomach. So if we kill that fish, we need to count all those eggs as lives inside their stomach, right? So each of them are life that we take if we eat that fish, that we'll have to pay back. Another one that he tells us to be careful of is pigs. So pigs are actually very good at guarding their corpses. So pig heads, pig feet, pig liver, stores tend to hang those pieces separately, especially in Asian countries. And some people like to pickle them. And pickling them means that those pig parts are sitting on the shelf for many years. So if a pig leg has been pickled for 3 years and it's not sold, that pig's soul just guards its corpse there for 3 years. It has to wait until all its meat is eaten or it's rotted away before it can be reborn. So some people think, well, then Holy Teacher, shouldn't we eat it? Help this pig reincarnate sooner? And then Holy Teacher responded, oh, so we think our merit is so great that we could help this pig be reborn, but we can't even be sure that we have enough merits to help ourselves, right? To be reborn ourselves. So how can we possibly be sure we can help this pig? So he advises us all to eat less meat. Another thing we need to consider is oftentimes we commit wrongdoings by assisting in killing. It's indirect and really easy to fall into in subtle ways we don't even realize. So like careless words like praising someone for killing animals, that's considered praising killing. So some examples the Buddha gives us: if someone's celebrating, they treat their guests to a feast of meat, and we say something like, wow, you've prepared such a lavish feast today. There's so many things to eat. It looks delicious. Great job. That is considered assisting killing, just saying that. Or if our children want to get married and they want to serve meat at the wedding, what do? If we respond with, sure, yeah, go ahead, treat everybody to meat, then we've indirectly assisted in killing. So a Holy Teacher recommends that we say, hey, your parents are very devout vegetarians. We really absolutely don't want any killing. And if those kids still insist, then we need to say, this has nothing to do with us. We want no part in it, to cut the karmic ties, right? So we can see how much just what we say has karmic implications. Another example that the Holy Teacher gives us If we know someone who wants to terminate a pregnancy, if we say something, say like, okay, get rid of it. By doing so, we're aiding and killing even though we didn't personally carry out the act. And if someone tells us they feel like their life is meaningless, they want to die, if we respond with, oh, what a worthless person, yeah, go ahead and die, then, and they were to actually take their own life after hearing us say that, we would be aiding their suicide through our speech. So Holy Teacher says we need to make sure we don't speak that way. Instead, we should be gentle and compassionate. We should care for them and help them gradually return to a positive state of mind. So we really don't want to underestimate the power of our words. A single sentence can impact someone's life completely. And as cultivators, we also want to uphold moral purity, be like the Buddhas. We want our actions and words to be pure. So we have to make sure that we don't speak recklessly. Another aspect to indirect killing is our professions. The Buddha tells us that when we choose a profession, we need to be careful not to get into industries related to aiding and killing. So some examples he gives us: we shouldn't sell hunting gear or fishing tools. And those who sell Western medicine, they need to consider their karmic consequences. So selling medications like painkillers, sleeping pills, they actually all carry karmic implications. So sleeping pills are meant to help people sleep better without trying to kill them. But if someone buys a lot of these sleeping pills in a short amount of time, we need to be cautious, right? What if they overconsume and they end up dying? Those are karmic consequences we need to face. He also says that we should avoid selling weapons like knives and guns because those aid in killing, right? And so people tend to be impulsive. And if they happen to have a knife, they get into an argument, it can become dangerous and turn violent. So those who sell knives, even if it's indirectly involved, they bear some karmic consequences. So it's best to avoid selling items like knives or any kind of weapon. He also says working in slaughterhouses is another example. The inventor of those electric slaughter machines for chickens and ducks, the inventors of these weapons will have descendants who also suffer consequences generation after generation. So how many lives have been taken by those machines? It's honestly very cruel. So he says that these machines are designed by electrical engineering departments. So those people who study that field need to be careful not to design such kind of machines and things. We should also not sell alcohol or give it as gifts because alcohol creates chaos. When people drink alcohol, they might drive recklessly, do immoral things, or commit evils. He also says that we should not engage in the sale of coffins. So why is selling coffins considered inappropriate? He says a coffin seller might, without any business, might start thinking, hey, there haven't been any accidents or deaths lately. They may even wish for a bunch of deaths just to have some business. So this thinking is cursing people to death. It corrupts the mind. Now, on the other hand, if we buy a coffin to give to someone, that's okay. That's considered a virtuous deed. But it would be wrong to have a bad thought like, oh, I bought this coffin. Why hasn't anyone died yet, right? So our intentions here matter a lot. And there's just so many professions in the world. We don't have to choose these, right? If we do, we're going to inherit the karmic consequences. It's just a matter of time. So another point, and one of the easiest to overlook, is to avoid wearing animal products. This includes leather jackets, leather belts, bags, and similar items. We should also avoid products like snakeskin, fur, cowhide, sheepskin, and etc. If we kill these animals to obtain these leather goods, Holy Teacher says we might end up in the realm of Yama, the king of the underworld, who might give us a pig skin to wear ourselves. That turns us into a pig instantly. Or he might give us a beautiful outfit, only for us to end up as a peacock in the zoo. Therefore, it's best for cultivators to avoid leather products and animal products as much as possible. Another thing we need to be careful about is when we lend money or give money. You know, sometimes we give money with good intentions, but we don't know how it's going to be used. So we might accidentally contribute to harmful actions. So, you know, when we're trying to donate, we need to also use our wisdom. There might be some religious organizations that might not be very righteous. So we want to know if they support vegetarianism or not. So in some ordinary temples, they tend to sacrifice animals like pigs and chickens. So if we donate, then we're inadvertently assisting in killing. Okay. And my mom, she actually loves to donate to charities to feed the hungry. But when she donates, she always makes a point to say, this money I'm giving is to help pay for food that is not meat. I want this money to go towards vegetables and rice. Okay, so having the right intention and that wisdom is important when it comes to our money. Another aspect to the no killing we need to consider is the degrees of severity. So what's considered severe? Obviously, you know, committing sins like killing our parents, our teachers, those of noble character, or our peers, that's considered a very severe offense. Lighter offenses include killing animals, but we can't think, oh, it's just a minor offense, so it's okay to kill them, right? We can't think, you know, ants are far from being enlightened, so it's okay to kill them too. We can't have those kind of thoughts. Holy Teacher says the moment we have those kind of thoughts, we've already violated the precept against killing. And we've planted the seed of killing in our consciousness, which never goes away. And he says, depending on the circumstances around the killing, such as if someone has mental issues, accidentally kill somebody, according to the law of karma, that's considered lighter than if a sane person did the same thing. He also says killing to save sages, saints, or large numbers of people in defense of one's country, against enemies. These are considered lighter offenses, but they're still karmic consequences. So what kind of karmic consequences? The first is that we will fall into the 3 evil realms, which include the beings in hell, hungry ghosts, and the animals realm. So falling into one of these 3 realms is very pitiful. It's very hard to turn things around once we've fallen into one of these. So we need to avoid that as soon as possible, right? Some other consequences, if someone kills many living beings, then when they're reborn as humans, they're going to suffer from a lot of illnesses and have a shorter lifespan. Some people are always suffering from one sickness or another, always relying on medication. So Holy Teacher says those people who are sick a lot need to release more living beings, be more merciful, and follow this precept. We will have bad fortune and affinities, meaning that our business dealings or interactions with others won't be very smooth. Some people, no matter how hard they try, they just can't make any money. The more they make, the more they lose. Meanwhile, some people just set up a roadside little stall and can make tons of money really easily. So this is all related to our karmic fortune. And if we fail in business, it's okay. We just want to release the living beings, refrain from killing, and accept it, right? So Holy Teacher says our hearts have been full of poison generation after generation. A person who kills is very cruel and malicious in their heart. So if we look at someone who slaughters pigs for a long time, their face becomes more and more like a pig's face. If they slaughter chickens, their face becomes more like a chicken. So whatever they slaughter, if they do it for long enough, their face becomes darker. In their consciousness, they often have thoughts of killing. If not animals, then they think about killing people. So this thought of killing is very heavy for them, right? They harbor evil in everything, constantly scheming against other people and even committing murder. So as a result, those types of people will cycle in the realms of hell and hungry ghosts over and over. Another consequence is that those people will have fear in their hearts. They're constantly worried about when their punishment will arrive, and they tend to have more nightmares. And killing also generates more evil. So we don't know how many spirits we've harmed in the past lives, right? So obviously those spirits won't be happy with us now. So similarly, people who kill a lot, they give off a very strong, negative yin energy, and others don't like to get close to them. Sometimes we might have bad luck with relationships with others. It's possible we did something hurtful to them in the past. Okay, so this is all karmic consequence of killing. Now, maybe, especially, we maybe not have done these bad things in major ways, but in minor ways, it's likely that we all have. So while there are consequences for killing, there's also good consequences for not killing. It helps cultivate fearless generosity. So fearless generosity doesn't mean we're not afraid to give a lot of money. Fearlessness here refers to giving without causing fear to animals or sentient beings. When we have compassion and we don't kill, then animals aren't experiencing fear, right? So by making another sentient being fearful, we're taking a life away from a creature that also deserves happiness. So as cultivators, we want to cultivate that fearless generosity, that kindness. We'll also have fewer illnesses and a longer life. So some people are very healthy even into their 80s or 90s. Meanwhile, other people are in their 20s and 30s and can't survive without medicine. Right? So this is related to our karmic history across lifetimes. We'll experience fewer troubles and more peace because we're less likely to be sick, less likely to have negative relationships with others, overall less suffering and less troubles. Now, when a person does a lot of killing, they tend to have worse tempers, they're more irritable. But if we're more compassionate, then others will naturally want to be close to us because we've shown them kindness through acts like releasing them. Spirits and guardians will want to help and protect us. And so then we can resolve our negative affinities with others and cultivate positive relationships. We'll experience less nightmares and just better sleep, and overall feel more peaceful. And by not killing, that leads to prosperity and freedom in future lives. So we can accumulate our merits, which leads to good health and peace, and we'll be able to generously give fearlessness to other sentient beings. So Holy Teacher tells us that we all need to be careful. When it comes to killing, there's just so much of it, and there's so many subtle aspects that we are likely to encounter. And so we might not even realize that we're committing wrongdoings all the time, right? So he says, if he were to tell us to commit some sort of major crime, like stabbing someone, setting a fire, robbing a bank, or even harming animals, as cultivators, we probably wouldn't do that. So why do we need to have these 5 precepts? Is because there's so many subtle aspects that we might overlook. So it's necessary to kind of explain these precepts to establish these guidelines. So the second precept is no stealing. Now, Holy Teacher describes different forms of stealing. Stealing, as it's commonly understood, involves taking advantage of others when they're not careful. So we know that's common theft. Then there's robbery, which is taking possessions forcefully while the other person is aware. So like bank robberies, or, we've seen pirates, that's considered robbery. There's also deception or cheating, like those scams where they deceive elderly people who are very trusting, or tricking retired military out of their pensions. Another form of stealing is through coercion or threats to extort money, like forcing somebody to pay them just to get past. So I was talking to somebody recently, and she told me that her family used to live in New Mexico, but they moved to Texas because the crime in Albuquerque was so bad. So she said that when you were driving and stopped at a red light, bad guys would knock on their window demanding money. And if you didn't comply, they would smash your windows in, right? So that's really terrible. Another type of stealing can be translated to slanderous taking. So for example, if we're traveling, we ask our friend to hold on to something for us, we trust them. And when we come back home from our trip, we ask for our things back. But our friend turns out to be greedy, denies having it, and then accuses us of lying. So that's called slanderous taking because it involves not returning items and falsely accusing someone else because of greed. And he says there's also fraudulent taking, meaning intentional deception, or like their word cannot be trusted. So the example Holy Teacher gives is if we have a valuable diamond, a friend admires it and then intentionally buys a fake one. And they swap our real one for their fake one and insist theirs is real and ours is fake. That's intentional deception that we can call fraudulent taking. Something else to think about, if someone steals from the poor and that poor person becomes really stressed and anxious over losing that money and they commit suicide, then that robber has now committed theft and killing, right? Violating 2 precepts. So as cultivators, we would likely not do something like that, but it's still important for us to know. So he says that there's some cases of stealing that are more severe than others. Obviously, if we steal from a temple blatantly, that's a very serious offense. But most cultivators won't blatantly steal, right? So he goes over some common offenses cultivators might make. So the first example is using public temple's resources improperly. Some people might go to temple to pray to the Buddhas and ask for help in their personal lives, and they burn lots of temple incense. In this case, we want to bring our own incense to show our respect and proper conduct, because if we ask for Buddha's help without making any merits of our own and are instead using up temple's resources, that's not proper behavior. Another example is personal phone calls on the temple's phone. We don't want to take advantage of temple, right? That's improper. Obviously, it's a different case if it's our own home temple. Another example is if we're cooking in the temple, we might taste test it to check the seasoning. That's okay. But if we're greedy and think it's super tasty, we just keep tasting it until we're satisfied, half of the food might be gone already before the meal's even served. And so in that case, it's not proper. You know, if there's a lot of leftovers at temple, it's okay to bring some home so the food's not wasted. But he says we should consider replenishing the temple supplies so that there's always fresh food available. Okay, so it's really about maintaining a balance. The more we receive, then the more we should be contributing. And we have to remember these donations belong to the Buddhas, not to us individuals. A more common offense is taking work supplies for personal use, especially if we're government employees. Taking things like paper, envelopes, pens for personal use is technically stealing from the government and from the taxpayers, right? So he says we need to have a clear distinction between what's office and what's personal. And he also says we shouldn't teach others how to do things like avoid taxes, avoid paying for public things like tolls or subways. And if we buy something and the seller suggests not issuing an invoice kind of to avoid taxes under the table kind of thing, if we agree to that, then we're also stealing from the government. So if everyone did this, then how would the country, pay for development and pay their public workers and officials? So as cultivators, we need to be proper and abide by the laws. And he says, ignorance is not an excuse. We need to be diligent and correct our behaviors. So stealing is really very nuanced and subtle, and it can feel like there are a lot of rules and restrictions. But Holy Teacher says if we don't listen, then we won't be able to keep our merits and our fortune, and that would really be a shame. Now, there are some situations, he says, that are not considered stealing. Assuming possession is if we genuinely make a mistake, take something that's not ours, and we don't realize. Like if everyone's black umbrellas are mixed together and we all take the wrong one. That's not considered stealing. If we believe someone's intending to throw something away, even if they weren't really discarding it, but we take it home, he says this is not technically the precept. Now, if we took something that we know is valuable, like a Rolex watch that was left on the table, if we assume it's unwanted, that's not okay, right? We know that that was not meant to be thrown away. So that distinction and wisdom in each situation is very important. Temporary use situations are when we use a friend's paper or their pen, their phone. But if we borrow something from someone, we need to make sure we return it as soon as possible. Familiarity sharing is when we visit a very close friend's house and we take a drink or a snack from their fridge. That's okay because we have a close relationship. But if we did that to somebody who wasn't a close friend, that would not be appropriate. Okay, so familiarity sharing relies on mutual trust and understanding. So these situations are not stealing because we did not have the intention to steal. Now, what are the karmic consequences for stealing? First is to fall into the 3 evil realms. So breaking any of the 4 major precepts of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying, all 4 of those can lead to falling into the 3 evil realms. So Holy Teacher tells us how difficult it is to be reborn as humans. So we really want to cherish this lifetime and use it for cultivating sincerely. So things like theft, embezzling money, lending money at very high interest rates, and exploiting other people's hard-earned money, these are all acts of stealing. And those people, their karmic consequences are that they will be reborn as animals like dogs. So dogs are often guard animals and compared to servants, according to Holy Teacher. And he says that those born poor or those that have wealth but can't use it freely, this is because of extensive stealing in past lives. So the wealth that can't be used freely, that could be from regretting donations as well. So let's say we donated a lot and then we regretted it. Even if we donated a ton and had some merits, the next life we might be rich, but we can't use that money freely. So that's the karmic consequence. Another one is if we steal or have a habit of taking advantage of others, people are obviously going to doubt us, question our character, right? If they lose something, they're going to suspect we stole it, even if we didn't. But if we're always honest people who return lost things, we live with integrity, then people are never going to question our character. They're going to know we're good people who are always doing the right thing. Those who steal tend to experience physical pain because of anxieties and worries. They usually don't sleep well at night, and they feel uneasy if there's even a knock on their door. They're scared it's police or somebody they took advantage of coming to confront them. So this feeling of unease can also be from past lifetimes of stealing. So he says there's so many more consequences than just these, but those who follow the precepts will have positive outcomes. Positive outcomes like wealth without loss, meaning those people will have money that doesn't just disappear. Their business won't fail very easily. They'll also be beloved and deeply trusted by many. They'll be known for goodness and they're going to be praised. So we would have a good reputation that's known widely. You know, people will say things like, oh, they're so good, or they won't say things like, oh, they're really good, but they have a bad temper, right? If we all uphold the precepts, they'll say things like, those people are really good, period. Now, a side note is that we should always maintain an attitude of praise. We want to focus on saying kind words. But if we discuss things on ways to improve or correct something, Holy Teacher says that's not criticism. But we do want to focus on saying good, kind things. And we'll be more peaceful and can return to heaven when we leave this world because we won't have any greed in our hearts. So we know we should not steal, and we know we shouldn't do anything improper. And Holy Teacher reminds us that, we have to do things carefully and respectfully at the temple especially. But it's okay to eat meals at the temple. It's okay to use communal things like toothpaste, towels, toilet paper. We can use them, but we should try not to be so stingy. We should give more. He says that generosity can overcome greed, right? So the reason a lot of people have a hard time being generous is because they're really attached. So we want to give more. Now, he says this precept of no stealing, it's something that's easy to break accidentally, but it's something we can improve on. So we just need to work towards not being careless. Okay, the third precept is no sexual misconduct. So Buddhas actually consider lustful thoughts as the most impure So he says lustful thoughts and improper desires are the root of disasters and trouble. Now, since we're cultivating the Buddha path, we need to practice restraint. So that doesn't mean cutting off marital relations. It just means that there needs to be propriety in all relationships. He says that relationships outside of the marriage is very improper, and it can cause a lot of problems like family issues and children's issues. So children's issues tend to come about from troubled families where there's a lack of responsibility between spouses, where there's a lot of selfishness and indulgence. So he advises that those that are unmarried to choose somebody based on inner beauty. He says that external attractiveness can be risky because if we pursue a very attractive person, that means others are going to want to pursue them as well, whether or not they're married. So we want to make sure we find somebody who shares our beliefs, our values. And he also mentions that these desires or pleasures are only temporary. They cannot satisfy our eternal happiness. So we want to make sure that we manage our families well, take good care of them, right? We want to cultivate, and that means applying Tao principles to all aspects of our lives, including our home lives. He says that in today's society, there is a lack of morals. People tend to pursue their own desires, and lust defies moral and ethical principles and is very dangerous, like a fire that once sparked cannot be controlled. So the way that we can treat this is to start by purifying the mind. We need to diminish our desires. So when desires arise, it's not about suppressing them through extreme actions like hitting the wall, he says. Instead, we need to calm them from within our hearts. So some suggestions he tells us is we should not overeat because being too full and comfortable can also lead to desires. It's best to walk barefoot at home to cool our feet down to reduce anger. And he says if we want to reduce sexual desires, the sure way to do so is to physically distance ourselves. It's best to not go near things that trigger wandering thoughts, specifically like books, magazines, movies. And he says, especially for males, they tend to have impure eyes, so that when they pass away, their eyes usually decay first. So he says that we need to keep our inner self pure, read more scriptures, more sutras, memorize them if we can. So that way, when we do have impure thoughts, we can quickly reduce them by reciting these things. So there are some people who can't help but look at attractive people. But I heard somebody say that they just picture those people as skeletons, as just the bones, right? So that they don't get tempted. And something to keep in mind is that all young, good-looking people, one day is also going to age, become wrinkly with white hair, also get sick, and one day pass away, right? So all this temporary and improper desires is just not worthwhile in the long term. So another karma consequence for the act of sexual misconduct is falling into the three evil realms, as we said earlier, right? Beings in hell, hungry ghosts, and animals. So we want to avoid that. Being involved with somebody else's spouse, so somebody who's married, that means in the future life, our own wife or daughters may be mistreated. Holy Teacher says that lust is the cause and the cycle of reincarnation is the effect. So if we truly want to become Buddhas and transcend the cycle, we need to eliminate lust completely. And he says it's not easy for humans, but if we can at least maintain these precepts, then we can avoid falling into the three evil realms and instead be reborn as humans, where we're going to have virtuous companions who will cultivate with us. In those cases, we can have a fulfilling and harmonious family life within the human realm. But it's really up to each of us what level of cultivation we want to reach. For those who want to transcend the entire cycle, then we need to completely eliminate lust. If we don't, he says it's like cutting weeds without pulling out the roots. It's just going to keep growing back. Now, obviously, it's not that easy to cut it out after so many lifetimes. So we need to just manage it wisely instead. So he says, instead of pretending to be pure while being really troubled inside, it's better to regulate it, be reasonable, and follow social ethics. The rewards for observing the precept include the body staying calm, chaos. It can increase our true wisdom in the human life. We'll have respectful relationships with parents, family, spouses, and our children. People and heaven will respect and praise us. If we become Buddhas in the future, we'll do so with a dignified appearance. And we can escape the cycle of reincarnation and achieve enlightenment early. So we want to make sure we maintain purity, self-respect, and propriety. Right? Once we commit to marriage, we should never break our vows. So we also have to have wisdom with this precept. There's the story of two male cultivators who were crossing a river. They saw a woman fall in, and one of the men reached out and grabbed the woman to save her. The other man said, "Hey, you just touched her, and you violated the third precept." But if he hadn't grabbed her, she would have died. So it's really important that we cultivate and develop our wisdom so we know how to handle these situations that arise, right? In that case, it's not improper, right? He needed to save her. Okay, so that's the third precept. There's two more precepts to discuss, and Holy Teacher says those two can be the hardest to keep. So the fourth one is no lying. Holy Teacher says lying is the beginning of all evils and sins. On the other hand, for someone to speak eloquently, that means they did not lie across 3 lifetimes. He says that so many people in society tell lies. Politicians make these big promises during elections to gain trust and votes, but once they're elected, once they're in office, they don't follow through, right? So they use their eloquent speech to take advantage. Another example is boys who deceive girls with sweet talk and flattery. Actors and singer celebrities, they exaggerate or portray a image, especially with social media. So he asks, how many are living a truly authentic and honest life? So Holy Teacher says that those who are in business are more likely to break this precept because they might have to sell something and then they sell it at double what it's worth, claiming it's really quality or exclusive. So some people say, well, then how are salespeople expected to make money? Well, he says, consider this perspective. I am doing business to earn sentient beings money. I'm accusing on their behalf. Otherwise, they may spend this money on meat, gambling, or deceiving women, leading to sinful actions, whereas I will use it for good purposes, for donations and charity, thus reducing some sins. So making money in business while being charitable helps offset some of the lying that is needed in business, but we should be careful not to lie a lot. And we also want to be responsible. Like after selling something, there should be an after-sales service to fulfill our duty completely. And we also want to avoid making promises beyond our capabilities. So he says those in business where lying, is hard not to lie, then talking less can be the starting point with gradual improvement over time. And he says that these jobs like lawyers, prosecutors, fortune tellers, feng shui consultants, their jobs rely on talking to earn money. But a single sentence from a judge or prosecutor can decide life and death. So he says he's not saying that we shouldn't do these jobs, but to just be careful and maintain fairness. And for fortune tellers and feng shui consultants, they tend to lack objectivity when advising others. They might say something like someone's fate is destined this way, or if they don't listen to my advice, they're going to suffer consequences. So this is quite harsh, not very helpful. And he says instead, those people should speak gently, just offer suggestions and positive words. By speaking so decisively, it can hurt others very deeply. So like we said earlier, it's advised that we pursue honorable professions that minimize negative karmic consequences. Buddha also tells us that cultivators should stay away from politics. Of course, we want to be good citizens, love our country, follow the government's policies, but he advises us to not join protests and rallies or spread divisive messages that can disturb other people's minds. So the consequences, he says, depend on the severity of our actions. So what kind of consequences for lying? Again, falling into the 3 evil realms after we die: beings in hell, hungry ghosts, and animals. If we lie a lot or speak badly of others or expose their private affairs, we will experience others speaking badly of us, affecting our reputation, and it may even just be unjust accusations, right? We might feel unwelcome and excluded wherever we go. So it's important that we start observing this no lying precept now. So in the future, we can build integrity and credibility. Others will respect and trust us naturally. Another consequence could be being ignored or not taken seriously. So if we want to be heard and accepted when we speak, we need to be genuine and honest. Another consequence could be incoherent speech. So some people are born with cleft lips or speech impediments, and it's difficult for them to speak clearly. Often it's karmic consequences from past lives. Or they could experience chronic bad breath, meaning bad breath that can't be cured. So this is also a karmic consequence of lying. So some people also have bad body odor. Holy Teacher says eating vegetarian can help lessen these conditions gradually, whereas eating meat can make it worse. So some good outcomes for not lying is pure mouth. If we follow that, then our speech becomes pure and fragrant. We can be trusted and respected by all. So the saying is, someone's word is as good as gold, meaning they trust us. People trust our character. They know we have integrity. Inner joy and others' delight, meaning we feel genuinely honest and happy every day. Others will appreciate that because we're trustworthy and reliable. We'll have a future life of pleasant sounds. So in future lives, all things we hear will be pleasing to our ears. There won't be any harsh or offensive words to disturb or trouble us. And we can increase our self-virtue and have infinite wisdom. So we want to maintain a pure mouth, we want to avoid insulting others, avoid harsh words or curse words, avoid speech that can hurt others and their confidence, avoid gossip, and instead help conceal other people's faults. Right, so we want to use our wisdom. Observe carefully, don't rush into judgments. There's a quick story is that a Confucius student was making breakfast for him. Something small fell from the ceiling and the student picked it out of his food and ate it. He thought, if this is something that might upset the teacher's stomach, I need to try it first. Confucius saw it and told the other students, look how disrespectful he was. He ate before I did. So the students even ended up yelling at the cook saying, how could you be so disrespectful? Well, the cook explained, I did it because something fell from the ceiling. I was afraid it would upset the teacher's stomach. So Confucius then gathered all the students and said, look, I'm known as your virtuous teacher, yet I misjudged somebody and twisted the entire situation. So how likely is it that a story that's passed through multiple people might be distorted or untrue by the time it reaches us? Okay, so this is how he taught his students. So when we're judging a matter, we want to make sure we understand the facts and don't jump to conclusions based on one-sided information, right? Otherwise, we could complicate things, create misunderstandings, or harm to others, and that can lead to negative consequences. So we want to make sure we don't speak carelessly. We want to say things that will restore other people's confidence, speak up for others when they're right, speak kindly, and speak of nourishing spiritual things that's good for our Buddha nature. Okay. So the last precept is no alcohol or intoxicants. He says alcohol is not technically impure, but can lead to other evils. When people drink or use intoxicants, their judgment becomes impaired, which can lead to things like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying. So, but once they're sober, their senses return, but the consequences are already in motion. So that's why it's advised to stay away from alcohol and drugs, especially as cultivators. We want to avoid putting ourselves in a position to make those kind of mistakes, right? Our aim should be to eliminate impure behaviors. Also, not only should we not drink, but we should not give it to other people. If we observe the 5 precepts, but we give alcohol or intoxicants to others, the karmic consequence, Holy Teacher tells us, is to have no hands for 500 lifetimes. That means being reborn as worms or caterpillars, and that's really terrifying. He also says that alcohol and drugs are addicting, and smoking is similar. It's really easy to pick up a habit, but so hard to kick it. So it's best to never even pick it up. Loss of wealth. When people drink a lot, they tend to use up all their money, make reckless financial decisions. Loss of merits, like virtuous qualities, tend to decline as well. But if we uphold the precepts, our moral character will never diminish. Loss of wisdom. Drinking a lot can cause us to lose ourselves. Our 6 senses take over, and they're drawn to these desires and dust, and it can make us very confused and foolish. During the Tang Dynasty, there was a poet who often said he found inspiration when he drank alcohol. But do we know how that poet died? He drowned in a river trying to grasp the reflection of the moon in the water when he was really drunk. So Holy Teacher tells us, don't think that drinking alcohol makes us cool. And remember, those who encourage us to smoke and drink, they're leading us towards trouble. So it's best to stay simple and pure, keeping our mind clear, and simple is the true path. Drinking can also cause a lot of serious health problems like cancer, liver cancer, diabetes, obesity, and even kidney disease. When our mind is clear and sober, people usually behave rationally and avoid wrongdoing. But when they drink, it can give them the courage to behave in ways they normally wouldn't, like violence, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying. When people are drunk, they might accidentally spill secrets that could hurt other people or even businesses, like company secrets, and could lose their jobs. Drinking can also cause our parents worries because they're worried what kind of troubles we're getting into, right? That's not very filial. And drinking can cause us to forget all the Tao principles we worked hard to learn, right? So we don't want to drink and then disrespect the teachings, the Tao, or Buddha nature. And good people will tend to stay away and attract bad people instead, right? It's easier to cultivate if we attract like-minded friends who have the same values as us. Some benefits to not drinking: we can preserve our wealth, support our family responsibilities, can nurture our clear wisdom, we can have a clear mind and be peaceful, avoid severe offenses, and maybe be reborn as human or in heavenly realms in the next life, right? So to review, these are the 5 precepts. These correspond with the 5 constant virtues. So not killing is compassion, not stealing is righteousness, no sexual misconduct is propriety, not lying is trustworthiness, and no intoxicants is wisdom. So Holy Teacher says these precepts are like a map. When we look at a map, then we know which direction to go, where we can go, where we can't go, and whether we follow them, whether we uphold them, it's all up to us. Now, if everyone maintained the precepts, there would be harmony in everything. In society, at home with our spouses and family, there would be no need for police stations or laws because nobody would break the law, right? Husbands and wives wouldn't cheat. Everybody would be peaceful and harmonious. So we don't need to be afraid of these precepts. We don't need to see it as a constraint, and we don't want to use it to judge others. So we've already talked about how these seeds planted in our consciousness over many lifetimes have accumulated so long, it's hard to remove. Everyone has bad habits and temperaments, and we're all at different paces in our cultivation. So we just need to gradually improve ourselves through following these precepts. They're meant to help us move forward on our path of Buddhahood. So even Buddhas began with practicing these precepts, right? They're the fundamental way of cutting off evils, doing good, so that we can nourish our virtues and enhance our wisdom. Now, cultivating requires keeping the body, mouth, and mind pure. So the mouth includes things like eating, drinking, and talking, while killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying and drinking are all rules concerning behavior, and those things harm our true nature if we do those things. So it can really feel overwhelming, all these precepts, obviously. There's so many details, but ultimately these 5 precepts that we're trying to focus on are the subtle parts, like our intentions, our thoughts. These are easily overlooked. And Holy Teacher said that some people think it's better to not even know any of this, right? But if we don't know, then we can't be freed from the cycle of suffering. We would just keep violating these precepts without even realizing. So if we want to avoid the 6 paths of reincarnation, avoid all those scary karmic consequences, then we need to cultivate sincerely, uphold these precepts, and hopefully we can return to permanent heaven one day. So Holy Teacher shared so much detail with us, but he says we know in our hearts what's right, and he can only guide us up to this point. The responsibility ultimately lies with each of us. So as long as we let our Buddha nature guide us, that is our true compass, then we can succeed, right? We'll naturally already follow all of those precepts. So that concludes the class today. If I said anything wrong, I ask for heaven for forgiveness and for transmitters to please correct me. Thank you.